In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is your host, Drew Hill, joined as always by Chris Herrington. We do have a few updates this week in terms of Grizzlies news. We had some roster updates that came through that we have yet to talk about. We also spoke to Ja Morant on Saturday night ahead of the Grizzlies game against the Los Angeles Clippers, a game that they lost. That was pretty entertaining for a game with so many guys out. I thought pretty high-level basketball game, which was good to see, especially for the diehards that are still down there, still at the arena. And we got a pretty good crowd on Saturday, I thought, actually, for the Memphis Grizzlies game. So we will get into all of that. Also, we didn't mention it last week. Chris, we can now say that this is like an award-winning podcast because it was honored in the APSE Awards, which was pretty cool. So that's a brand new category, and I know
I'm guessing 2% of the people listening
know what that is.
Idea what APSE means.
It's fine. Just know that we're happy to get that result, and thank you for listening, because obviously the people that listen to this podcast continue to keep this podcast going, and so we really appreciate everybody that listens to this thing. And
just for the record, APSE is an Associated Press sports editors thing.
Yes, it's a national contest, so that was pretty cool, and that was something that was, as I said, a new category. So it was very nice to get recognized for that. So thank you, as I said before, for listening, and you can always review this podcast wherever you listen to the podcast, and make sure you do that. Okay, on to Ja, which was the big news on Saturday. He spoke before the game. Just some behind the scenes here. I know usually when players are injured in the past, they haven't spoken to the media, but it is part of NBA policy that once a player has missed 2 weeks, they are required to talk to the media one time before they return to practice. And the Basketball Writers Association does prefer that NBA teams follow the league's media policy rules. And that's sort of how this came about, where Ja was to speak to us ahead of the game against the Clippers. I don't know if there's anything super notable that came out of it. The two main things were he sort of just reaffirmed that he his answers that he gave in London, that he's a loyal guy and he wants to stay in Memphis. And he also said he wasn't a big fan of the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade, but he understood that this is a business. I'm sure you read it, Chris, and you're aware of the comments. What struck you, if anything?
I not a lot struck me, to be honest. I think the underlying situation has been made as clear as people involved feel like they're capable of making it. And that is Zach Kleiman came out. He obviously, they basically announced they were trying to trade Ja Morant, all but announced they were trying to trade Ja Morant. They tried to trade Ja Morant. They didn't find a deal they felt comfortable doing. And Zach Kleiman came out and said after the trade deadline, I can't remember all the language, but we're turning the page, we're moving forward.
We turned the page as much as we could.
As much as we could at this deadline. And when asked about Morant specifically, he said something like, Ja gets I'm paraphrasing. Ja gets a lot of attention. This is not about Ja. This is about organizational direction. Now, I think if you dig back deep enough, it starts out being about Ja. But once they decided to trade Jaren, it was so hard just to think about Ja. It was like they had fully committed to a rebuild, and that's what they're doing. And I think there will be an exit one way or another. I suspect this summer there will be a departure of Ja Morant from the Grizzlies. And I just don't think anyone's going to say, and probably no one else is going to say anything else till the end of the season at this point. Nothing anyone says is going to change just the underlying thing. The organization has made a decision that they're moving on, and they got to figure out a way to move on from Morant this summer.
Yeah, the interview was a little uncomfortable. It just was. It just was a little uncomfortable because I think everybody that was in the media room kind of understood where the team stands because of those comments from Zach Kleiman. And Ja wasn't going to be thrilled to talk about it, understandably so.
Sure.
And so it was just like I said, there's more to this situation and like why Ja's talking than just like the desire to talk to Ja. I think it's more so like an NBA media policy thing. So I wasn't expecting a ton to come out of it new, and I don't think a lot of new did come out of it, to be honest. Um, and I don't think anything was said that was like inflammatory, right? That would
Right.
make
Yep.
it would change the direction of this thing. So it went about, I think, as I would have expected. Have we talked since the injury update? I'm not sure we have.
I think we've talked. I was trying to remember when we recorded last week because I feel like that. I feel like we've talked since the ED injury update.
Okay, but
I think
maybe
that.
not
I
the
think.
jaw. Maybe not the jaw injury update,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
was
I didn't even think about that as an injury update.
yeah.
Honestly, I was trying to remember where we ended up between the ED injury update and Coward's return, which is something we have not talked about. Cedric Howard getting back on the floor. But so yeah, the jaw injury update. What do we make of that? I don't make much of it.
So they said last week that his elbow hasn't fully healed and that he will be reevaluated in 2 weeks. We know with the Grizzlies that you have to pay attention to the wording here and for every team in the league that reevaluation means that they're going to look at it again, not a return to play timeline. And that does sort of take you up to the end of the regular season. There's only going to be what, 3 more weeks? 3 more weeks, I think, maybe four. When Ja's going to be reevaluated. So theoretically, it's possible that he could play again for the team this season. He said he is still experiencing pain when he tries to whip a pass to the side. He's still having elbow pain with that, and it just hasn't fully healed. He said he hopes that he plays again this season. When he was asked, whether or not he thinks he will, and like let's just be honest, this is more complex than just the elbow injury, right? It's more
Right.
complex than this because you have the organization put Ja in a little bit of an uncomfortable spot when news leaked out that they were publicly listening to trade offers for him. And then Ja can put the organization in a little bit of an uncomfortable spot because he has such a strong fan base when he says, I want to be here, and it kind of paints the organization as the bad guys if they trade him. And so we don't have the answers to all of the questions. Does Ja want to play? Do the Grizzlies want him to play? It's
Right.
just there's so many moving pieces here that it just becomes so convoluted that you just if I asked you to predict is he going to play again this season, which was a question I was asked on a podcast earlier today, I don't think I have a great answer for that right now.
No, you're right. It's murky about what the incentives are, and the incentives are doubly murky because not only is the team taking active measures to orchestrate their draft positioning. There's also we just tried to trade Morant and we're going to try to trade again this summer. So it's a double layer of like weird incentives that's outside of a normal basketball season about the injury. And that double layer of incentives will naturally lead to questions of the same questions you just asked. Like, does he actually want to play? Do they actually want him to play? How real is this? On top of that, the NBA, underscoring that, underneath that, the NBA is being more meticulous than in the past, I think, about managing the injury stuff. And so teams can't just be making up stuff wholesale on this front. And we know Ja had a real injury. And so, but I think once there's a real injury in place, like, there's enough murkiness there. You can probably string it along a little bit more than you would have, in some other situation. I mean, the question of, how much would a guy be playing in a playoff race versus not in a playoff race? I mean, I think there's always a difference there with guys. So I don't think we know on that front. I do think if you're operating under the assumption they're going to try to trade Morant again this summer, which I think is an extremely safe assumption for all to operate under, Morant's injury history does throw a wrinkle into this, where I do think, I don't know whether it'd be comfortable to get him back on the floor, for the organization or for Morant. But I do think there is something to like seeing him when he's saying like, so my elbow hurts when I'm throwing a pass. Given his injury history, if I'm another team, I am very interested in what his actual health is.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the case. Okay, onward past the Jaw stuff. Let's move on to other roster things. The Grizzlies signed Omax Prosper to a standard contract. I believe there's a team option at the end of the season. Then they moved Ryan Rupert into the two-way spot that Omax was previously in to I think keep another player through the end of the regular season. Now it's prorated, right? The amount of games that Rupert can play. So he's not going to play in every game, but
Right.
he's going to be available in a lot of these games for the Grizzlies down the stretch. And I think Omax was very deserving of that contract based on the way that he played through the end of the season. And the coaching staff has been extremely complimentary of his motor, and I do think that is the best thing about his game. And he said it himself. I thought it was a great answer that yeah, he was on a two-way contract, but he doesn't necessarily look at the contracts of players and associate that with value, right? He has to think of himself and hold himself in a higher regard than that. And I think he's played like that this season. And so I think he deserves a lot of credit. The shooting has been much improved from his 2 seasons in Dallas, which I think is a big plus for him to go with the motor. And he's played in a position at center where he typically wouldn't be for a long, he wasn't expected to be, at least coming into the season. And then given all the injuries and the way that the Grizzlies have sort of fallen out of the playoff race here, or play-in race, I should say. I think all in all, it's been a very good season for Omax in reviving a little his NBA career a little bit.
Yeah, if you wanted to go back in the archives of this podcast, you would find our draft edition podcast in the summer of 2023, and where we had our favorite players for, like, I think Grizzlies had a pick in the mid-20s at that point. They ended up trading the pick, not taking a player, I believe. That's right. And my number one guy was Omax Prosper, coming out of Marquette. And the reason was the rangy 6'7", athletic, high energy, like hustle kind of player that, like, those just guys are valuable and useful. And the question was, can he score? Can he score at all? Like, can he shoot at all? And the answer through his first 2 NBA seasons was no. He can't shoot and he can't score. And that has changed for the Grizzlies this season. How much that carries over, I don't know. But for the Grizzlies, he's shooting 41% from three and 82% from the free throw line, which is another big boost from his 2 previous seasons. So, like, that's a small sample. But is that real? Whether it's 41% or it's like 36, like whatever, is he a real shooter? And if he's a real shooter to go with just the high energy play, the hustle play that he provides, I just think he's a really useful guy. I think that's great to have a team option on him for next season at what's a minimum salary. The issue, it's not an issue doing the contract. It's great for them to do the contract. The issue projecting it out is this roster crunch they're headed into, because they have, I believe, 14 players already under contract next season. I think that's right. And they have 3 picks in this draft, all in the top 35. And something's got to give. So there's going to be some movement this summer. And so the question for Omax is going to be, when the carousel stops spinning, is there a seat for him, like, on the roster? And I don't know whether that'll be the case or not. It depends on a lot of stuff that's, like, on a Ja trade and all kinds of other stuff that may or may not happen. But I think if the carousel stops spinning and they have a spot for him, I think he'll be a great guy to have on the roster at that contract.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. I would just add, not positionally and not necessarily skill wise, but I think I can draw a little bit of a line between a John Conchar and an
Yeah,
Omax Prosper from the standpoint of, if that guy is going to be one of your depth pieces on your team, that's the type of player you want. Somebody that does stuff, someone that has the energy and the motor to come in and have an impact on the game versus some sort of specialist, right?
yeah.
In some sort of specialty role, 3-point specialist, whatever. You would rather have players that can grab a rebound or run the break and or, be in the mix defensively. And I think both of those players do that really well. And Omax, if he were in that role for the Grizzlies, I think is a very useful player projecting forward. So I would like the idea of Omax being on the roster beyond the season. But as you mentioned, we just don't know what's going to happen with the roster crunch, and they got so many guards right now. That's
Right.
another thing we maybe can talk about Walter Clayton a little bit. But yeah, that to me, I think was a very uh, deserving step up in contract for Omax Prosper based on the way that he has played this season. And then repair backfills on the two-way spot. I don't think he's eligible to be a two-way player next year. So
I think he is actually, unless
okay,
that rule's changed, because this is his third year. I think you can go through 4 years. I might be wrong about that. It's either 3 or 4, um, and have that. So I'm not sure. Let me back up. I'm not sure. You might be right. You might be right. I'd have to go back and look that up. But it's either third year or fourth year is the limit. He and
well, if
Prosper are
he's
both
back, it's a two-way, and I
he
and
and
I
yeah
don't know. I
he and
I don't know with the
yeah.
draft assets that they have.
I suspect it doesn't matter in this specific case. But he and Prosper are both third year guys. I know when it came up with Bassey, he was no longer eligible. Was one of the issues there. Where I think Coloco was. There was sort of a weird thing earlier in the season with that. But I don't. I mean, Rupert has I think been a little better than I expected him to be. But I don't really given the makeup of the entire roster, I don't really project him out. I'd be surprised if he were on the team next season, honestly.
Did you watch the game against the Clippers?
I have watched segments of Grizzlies games of late. Yeah. One notable thing is that Cedric Howard is back.
Yes.
He's played 2 games out of 3 since he's come back. He's had 15 points off the bench in both games. They're playing him. They keep him on this minutes limit. They're not doing the back to backs. I suspect they'll probably just do that the rest of the season. But one of the things I wrote about, he made his return game in Minnesota, a game I was at. And sort of one of the things I wrote about that off of that game was there's not a lot to play for in terms of individual accolades with the Grizzlies this season. There's really only one, and that is whether Cedric Howard will be first team all rookie or second team all rookie. That's the only thing that's out there. And I do think he needed to come back and play to maintain his first team all rookie status, if that means anything to anybody. Because if he had not come back, I think by the end of the season, given the games played, he would not have been there. But for him to come back and be productive and remind people, like, I'm sorry, I know, like Fears and Queen are playing more minutes on a team that's made it up higher in the standings, maybe, but they're just not as good as this guy right now.
Yeah. One thing that I did note from the Clippers game was Islo talked afterwards and said something we've mentioned on this podcast, and I know you wrote about during the Grizzlies or following the Grizzlies game against Minnesota last week, which was getting Cedric Coward more creation opportunities.
Right,
He actually mentioned Gigi in that as well. He threw the
right.
two of them in together, getting Gigi and Cedric Coward more creation opportunities. And that's a little bit of a challenge when your roster is so loaded with point
Well,
guards.
when you have all these guards, and the point he was making, at least in Minnesota with the Gigi thing, was he was using that as an illustration of Gigi has been getting a lot of the same kind of touches that you could get Cedric Howard in the flow of an offense. It's not like guard style touches. It's not like here's the ball, clear out, this guy's going to cook. But it's it's catching the ball in positions to to make a play, right? To get downhill and drive, to take a shot. It's touches that lead to shot attempts and that creates offense without being a guard style, like let's run a pick and roll and I'm handling the ball kind of thing. So he sort of used Gigi as an illustration of Gigi's taken some of those touches with Coward out. Those are the kind of opportunities to get those guys. But you just talked about playing a total game, right? That Coward can do so many things that, working on him as a screener and a roll man, getting the ball on the screen and roll is part of it, and other things. And it's not going to be, here's the ball, clear out, go one-on-one. They may not be doing a lot of that with him right now.
Yeah, and Gigi, when he sort of talked about these opportunities that he's sort of taking advantage of as of late, same thing we've been talking about, feels like every podcast, but he said the difference between rookie year Gigi, which, he posted good numbers that year, and 2025-26 Gigi, is that this version of Gigi does a lot less dribbling. And I think that is
Right.
definitely true. I think the way he described it, he's got that youthful energy to him. I think that's why everybody likes talking to him in the locker room. But he was like, instead of just back up, dribble, tap, 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 this is now straight down, one dribble to the basket, dunk.
Yeah. No,
It's night and day.
he's not playing with the ball. He's not dancing with the ball. It's decisive. It's quick, decisive actions. Decisive
Yes.
catch and shoot, decisive downhill attack. And that's just made him not only that's made him a more efficient player, it's also made him a better player in the team construct.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, when you look at the future of this team, do you feel differently about Gigi today than you did maybe at the start of January in
I
terms of the
think you,
future?
I think you do, and I think part of it is that they are clearly bought in on Isolo as head coach, right? At least for next season. We'll see what happens at the end of next season, like with any other coach, right? I think a lot of fans have had consternation about Isolo, and I think Kleiman has made it pretty clear that he feels good about his coach.
Well, I think part of that's because of the Ja stuff, if
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
just
yeah.
being honest.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think some fans are starting to pick up on the idea that, hey, some of these young guys are actually developing pretty well, and these guys are playing hard, even though they're not set up to win with the roster. And I think there's still a lot of questions about Isolo's rotations and some of that kind of stuff. But I think the buy-in from players and the way guys are developing and the effort guys are playing with, I think is getting noticed by a lot of fans. But the point I was going to make about Gigi relative to Isolo is that Gigi has been a real success story for Isolo, right? That Isolo has specifically gotten him back on track in a way that he had sort of, he had popped under Taylor Jenkins and he had faded under Taylor Jenkins. And Isolo has sort of coached him up, like really coached him up and got him playing serious basketball. And so not only is Gigi a promising player going forward, but he's a reflection of the success your coach is having. And so I think that doubly makes him someone maybe they'll get a little bit more serious about than maybe they would have otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's been good for Gigi that Tomas is a coach that's not going to crown anyone, right?
Yeah.
He got
Yeah.
asked about just before Omax got the contract. I asked him about Omax, and if Omax had played his way to a spot where he looks like he belongs in the league, which his last season at Dallas he got waived, so that was in question. Doesn't seem
Right.
to be in question anymore. Like he seems like he could be a useful player, and even with a question like that, Tomas said, "We'll see." He is not crowning any of these guys, and I think for Gigi, who admitted to some immaturity and struggles that second season under Taylor Jenkins when he wasn't, you know, in the rotation the way that he wanted to be, like that's healthy, and I think you're seeing the results of this, with Gigi this season.
One sort of aspect of the Gigi thing, and we'll get into this more when we get into the summer. He's got a team option next season too, and it's a team option at a low number under 3 million. And obviously, that is not a contract you decline and let him walk away, right? So that is not a path that will happen. Of all the paths that will happen, declining that option and having him walk away is not one of them. He's too good for that. So, like in theory, like he could be part of a trade, like almost anyone on this roster could. You could bring him back on that option. Just pick up your option. You got Gigi Jackson for 2.8 million or whatever, and that's a great contract. Or do you look at that and say, maybe we don't want to take him in on that contract and have him headed towards unrestricted free agency a year from now? Maybe we use that team option as leverage to try to tear that up and do a new deal this summer. That's something they could do. They could decline it and do a different kind of contract, a bigger deal, with the thing of like, we could bring you back for 2.8 or whatever it is, or we can get you more money now. I don't know which way they'll approach that, but that's a conversation they're going to have about Gigi Jackson this summer.
Let's talk about the guard crunch real quick, and then we'll move on to some draft stuff, college basketball, whatever else, standings. I don't, Walter Clayton was someone that I think fans had a little bit of high hopes for because he was that first round draft pick in the trade, and he's posted some games with some good assist numbers. But as you mentioned the other day or the last time we podcasted, maybe that's a little bit more of the result of just being ball dominant when he's in the game. I don't know. What have you made of Walter Clayton so far in the mix of guards?
I have struggled with him a little bit. I don't. I'm trying to pull up some stat stuff to see if, because I haven't looked at his numbers. I've just watched the games. I'm going to see if it matches what I think I've been seeing. Um, Yeah.
It feels like he doesn't. He has popped the least, I should
Yeah.
say,
I mean,
of the guards because
he's
Javon Small's played a little bit better, I think, in these recent games.
no, I agree. I was about to say the same thing. I mean, he's supposed to be a shooter. He's 21% with the Grizzlies. He was 31% with Utah. I know the assist numbers have popped in some of these games. I have not watched him in those games and thought point guard of the future. I haven't even watched him in those games and thought backup point guard of the future. I feel like he still needs to profile as more of a shoot first kind of player, even though with the Grizzlies in these games, the shots haven't been falling and the assists have been up. So when I watch the team play, I mean Jerome's sort of in a separate category. You know, he's just better. And that's more of a question of like, do you bring him back as a player or use him as a trade asset? I mean, he's important one way or the other. I wrote about Pippen last week, Scottie Pippen coming back. I think it was funny when Zach Kleiman talked at after the trade deadline. He just listed a bunch of players, and Walter Clayton was one of them, by the way. And he didn't mention Gigi Jackson. Everyone was like, "Wait a minute, why is he talking about Gigi Jackson?" He didn't mention Scottie Pippen. I think that was just oversight because Pippen had not been playing. I think Pippen's better, right? And so if I'm ranking these guys in terms of importance, and I'll do that at the end of the season, and the order may change. Like to me, Jerome and Pippen are more important than the others. But you look at what Cam Spencer has proven as a shooter, like not theoretical, he's done it in the NBA. And you look at Javon Small in terms of quickness on the ball. To me, Clayton is the one that I would put fifth on that of those five in terms of my interest going forward. And maybe that'll change by the end of the season.
Yeah, he's got a lot of opportunity. He does, but he hasn't seized it yet.
He has not popped for me at all, even in the big assist games.
Okay. Let's talk about the standings a little bit and about college basketball, but first let's take a break for a message from our sponsor.
Want to make a big impact without getting lost in a big system? Join Youth Villages to be a force for families while becoming part of one. Help make positive changes on a national scale, one community at a time. It takes a family to transform lives. Start with yours. Apply now at youthvillages.org/careers.
Okay, Chris, you are on the record being worried about the Chicago Bulls catching the Memphis Grizzlies in the reverse standings.
I am slightly less worried, but I'm still a little worried.
As the standings sit today, it is Monday. We are recording this on Monday. This podcast will not be out until Tuesday. So the Grizzlies do have a game against the tanking Brooklyn Nets tonight, which is a very winnable game. So things may change here. But as of today, as of this exact recording, the Grizzlies are 3 games behind Chicago in the win column. Chicago is 26-38. The Grizzlies are 23-39. The Bulls did get a very important loss to the Sacramento Kings over the weekend on Sunday. This is going to be a close race because if you try to look at games that these two teams may actually win, there's still 2 games between the Bulls and the Grizzlies.
Yeah, no, I'm a little concerned about the Bulls. I would say I still feel good about New Orleans. They're not there yet. There's only a 2-game gap in the win column between the Pelicans and the Grizzlies. They're only 1 game total up on Dallas. So I think they're about to pass Dallas pretty soon. They've got DeJounte Murray back. So I think at this point with the Grizzlies, there's 2 things there. There's trying to hold off Chicago and trying to hoping New Orleans can slip past. That would move the Grizzlies up 1 spot in the standings lottery wise. I think that's the best case scenario because I don't think they're catching in the reverse standings Dallas or Utah.
Pelicans, this is the Pelicans' remaining schedule. Got the Raptors, the Rockets on the road, the Mavericks at home, very winnable game. 2 home games against the Clippers, those you can win. At home against the Cavs, on the road against the Knicks, on the road against the Pistons, on the road against the Raptors, at home against the Rockets, so there's not a lot of wins in that mix. On the road against the Blazers, and then on the road against the Kings, at home against the Jazz, mixed in with 3 games against playoff opponents in April. So there's like 6, 7 pretty winnable games, I think, for New Orleans the rest of the season. And right now they're 2 games behind you in the win column. So I think there's some serious hope there that that's going to work out. And then when you look at the standings, you also got to think about, of course, Orlando and
Man,
Phoenix.
I'm so done with Orlando. I'm not done. I still hold out some hope, but Orlando has not been coming through for us.
No,
Minnesota really did not come through. They got blown out on their home court by Orlando on Saturday. I think I had a friend over. We were hanging out watching that game. It did not go well for the Grizzlies. They eked out some close wins too. I will say it's still really tight. Orlando at the moment has moved up to 6, which is where the Grizzlies do not want them to be. But they're basically tied with Miami at 6-7. They're only one game on Philadelphia at 8. Only 2.5 on Atlanta at 9. There's a lot of volatility in that range still to come. So who knows what'll happen with that?
here's the bad news. Orlando has an easier schedule remaining than both the Heat and the Sixers the rest of the way.
Right.
They have one game against the Thunder, one against the Pistons, one against the Celtics, another against the Timberwolves, two against the Cavs, and one against the Lakers. But they also have 6 games against teams that are tanking. And then Miami, on the other hand, um, they have a very difficult schedule. They have a game against the Spurs, a game against the Celtics, one against the Rockets, two against the Cavs, one against the Lakers, two against the Raptors. They have 3 games left against the Wizards, which is good news, and one game left against the Pacers. But the other two teams that are sort of, you know, opponents on the lower side in terms of win percentage that they still have to play are the Bucks and the Hornets, who are playing pretty good basketball right now. So Miami's schedule is much tougher than Orlando's. That's the concern there.
Yeah, I'm at the point now where I'm not going to sweat it, the Orlando thing anymore. I'll keep an eye on it, see what happens. It's still all tightly bunched. Anything could happen. I think at this point, Grizzlies, Bulls, Pelicans, those are the 3 teams to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Well, we will see what happens there. Do you want to run a tankathon simulation, Chris?
I always want to run a tankathon. I haven't even done one today. Usually I'm on like it's just like coffee. Usually I'm on my 3rd simulation by this time of day.
Okay. You ready? One,
Yeah.
2, 3. Oh my goodness.
I don't know, man. Mine's pretty good too. Do we have a good day?
I think I got you beat.
I think it may have to go to tiebreakers on this one. You go ahead.
Did we just press it at the exact same time and then we got the exact same result because that was the schedule?
Who do you
I've
have
got
as the third? Who do you have as the 3rd pick?
the Mavericks.
Okay, we don't have the same one.
I've got the Grizzlies moving up 7 spots to the number 1 pick in the draft.
Me too.
What's the date? March the 9th. If this happens, circle the date. March the 9th.
Two separate outcomes. Grizzlies number 1. This is a historic moment.
Grizzlies number 1, Nets number 2, Mavericks number 3, and Wizards number 4. I mean, how would you not take that?
So it's a close call because you have a West team at 3. I have a West team at 2, and so who do you hate more of these West teams? I've got Grizzlies 1, Jazz 2, Pacers 3, Nets 4. So would we rather have the Jazz at 2 or the Mavs at 3? I think we'd rather have the Mavs at 3 because they got Cooper Flag, but they don't have a lot else, and the Jazz are loaded. Jazz don't need to be adding a top 3 pick to this. They just got Jaren.
Yeah, I don't know. That is insane that we both just did that. I mean, what are the odds? Crazy low. This is going to be the most. We should cancel the tankathon segment now because we're never going to do any better than this.
No, it's all downhill from now. Yeah.
Did you watch any college basketball this week, Chris?
Yeah, I did. I find myself I keep watching a lot of the same teams in terms of real games because of my limited availability, but I watch a lot more on YouTube of players. I think this class of guards we've been talking about a lot, and it's particularly relevant to the Grizzlies because if they don't move up, they may be looking at some of these guys. It's really hard to sort out to me because they all, and to me, it's a group of 5. I think there's a consensus 4. I would add Braden Burris to the list. Other people might not put him there. Some people like you, maybe Alabama guy, might put LeBaron Philon on the list. To me, there's a list. To me, it's 4. It's 5. It's the main 4, and it's Burris. You could talk yourself into all of them. You can talk yourself out of them too. Like I think all of them have things that would concern you. I think since last we spoke, Darius Acuff had that monster game against Texas, right? The thing that jumps out to me about him, I know you've been really high on him lately. The thing that jumps out to me about him from a positive standpoint his turnovers are crazy low for a guy who has the ball
Yeah.
that much and generates that much offense, both in terms of scoring and passing.
What I like about him is exactly what we talked about creating for others. Like
Yeah.
he creates the baskets for his teammates. He had 13 assists, I think, in that Texas game. He creates the opportunities for his teammates by doing the attacking himself. And I think that that is definitely a big positive in Acuff's game. Our guy, Mikael Brown, is just
I,
not playing
I was
basketball.
just going to ask you about him because he's a Louisville guy. What have you made? And his season at this point is almost over. What have you made about of this college season and what it says about him?
I think he's much more of a question mark than maybe you would have anticipated early in the season. Because I remember watching the early games, and like I did not grow up a Louisville fan. I did grow up in Louisville, Kentucky.
Right.
So I did watch a lot of Louisville basketball when I was younger, and he's had this back problem, which
Right.
is not like something that you want to hear. And I remember early on in the season thinking like, wow, this guy's a freshman, but he's like ready to go. This guy's just like, he doesn't make that many negative plays. He's solid. He does everything. He can pass well. He can shoot it. And then as the season went along, it was more of a mix because the mistakes really did start to pile up a little
Right.
bit. And so the talent is clearly there,
I
but the
I think
production is not at this point.
I think of these 4 to 6 guys, whichever ones you want to put on the list. He might be the greatest raw talent. He's 6'5". He can finish above the rim. He's a deep range shooter. He's a creative passer. Like he's got very, very high upside across the board. And the turnover stuff and the inconsistency and the decision making, I get sort of LaMelo vibes off of him a little bit. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, it's the eye of the beholder. It's someone it's a player type I'm not super comfortable with myself. And so yeah, I don't know about him. To me, the order of these guys is not clear. Kingston Flemings has been the consensus like top guy, and it's not clear to me at all he should be relative to Acuff and Brown and even Wagler and Burries. I just think they're all different kinds of players. I think the defensive potential that somebody like Burries has, I think it's been a little bit too discounted. I would be curious to know what his season would have looked like on a different team. Because the thing about Wagler and Burries both is they're both on really, really talented, deep, loaded teams, Arizona and Illinois. And they're both playing beside senior point guards who are projected to be draft level guys in Bradley and Boswell with Illinois. The difference there is that Boswell got injured for like 2 or 3 weeks and they gave Wagler the ball, and all of a sudden, like, who's this freshman scoring 45 at Purdue or whatever? Burries has never had that opportunity. There's never been a period where like, okay, you're the guy, here's the ball. He's still been having, he had 31 against Colorado over the weekend. I'm really interested in him because of the all-around skills, the defense, the decision-making, the size, the strength. I just don't know if I'm dead certain he's an primary on-ball guy in the NBA the way these other guys are.
We're just gonna name this the Braden Burries podcast because we
I
talk
know I
about
bring
him
him up
every
a
year.
lot. I'm very interested in him. And I think where the Grizzlies are going to pick, he's a guy who's likely to be on the board. If they end up picking in that 8, 9, 10 range, they're not going to have their choice of these guys. There's going to be one or two of them on the board.
Um, I watched Alabama and Auburn a little bit on replay because the Grizzlies were playing. Auburn's one of the bubble teams this year. Uh, I don't know how they were so bad on defense. They made Phylon look like prime Kyrie Irving. Um, so I can't really take that much out of that. Obviously, I'm just watching that because I'm an Alabama grad. I also watched some of Vanderbilt, Tennessee. No Nate Ament again. Tyler Tanner's another player that people talk about as a potential first round draft pick, and he's very good, but the size isn't there, and
There's
that's
a there's a class of player in this draft, and it's debatable whether Phylon is in this class or in the other class. I guess it's debatable whether Burries is or not. But there's a class of player in this draft that I will look up on draft night and I'll kick myself for not spending more time on them. And the Grizzlies will take one of these guys at 17 or whatever. I just the smaller guard, lead guard types who don't clearly profile as high-level NBA starters, I'm just not interested in for the Grizzlies. They already got plenty of those guys at home, you know? And so I really like Christian Anderson, who I brought up. You know, I think
Yeah,
Phylon
I do
fits in that a little
too.
bit. Sturts, Tanner. I just don't see the Grizzlies taking one of these dudes. If you don't think you're taking your starting point guard for the next 10 years, I don't see them taking a small guard.
I saw some of Michigan State. Um,
I really like
Michigan's
Morez.
interesting.
I really like Morez Johnson.
Well, you also brought up Ade Mara
I like
in
it. I
the
like him a
last
lot too.
podcast. The
He
the
didn't have a he
Michigan
didn't.
front court's very good. That is what. Sorry to interrupt. That
Yeah,
is what is so impressive about Boozer is that if you like these Michigan guys, he crushed these Michigan guys. You know,
every,
I like.
every,
It's what's he stepped up in these games where he played against competition that is very good. The one game against Wilson that he had, the North Carolina game earlier this season, and the Michigan game, and he was still the same high level player against that level of competition. I mean, it's impressive.
Aka finally had a bad game against somebody recently. I can't remember which one it was, but he finally had at least a bad box score line. Boozer just doesn't ever.
Never. I
He's just
know.
he's always good.
So I watched some of that. And Michigan's front court is very good. The back end of the first round front court players to me are way more interesting for the Grizzlies than the guards. You know, we brought up Tyler Tanner, whatever, but like Swain interests me, Mara interests me, Morez Johnson interests me, Joshua Jefferson really interests me. So I if you're thinking about the Grizzlies 32nd pick, the second round pick that's early, and in 18, if the Magic stay where they are, you know, I think that there will be some interesting players, but I don't know if there's like if you don't get your guard in that 7, 8, 9 mix, you know, do you
I,
can you take two guards with a roster that's so full of
I,
guards?
I think if you end up taking a guard in that top 10 pick, that's the guy you're hoping is going to be your lead guard. You know, your number one guard going forward. And absent that, I just think that's something you're trying to address. You know, later on with trades, next year's draft, whatever. I mean, you can't check every box at once, and like I just don't. And again, maybe they'll just have a certain grade on a guy, but I just don't see taking one of these smaller guards late. I think some of these bigger wings you're talking about. I think they only have one center on the roster, and that guy's hurt. Zach Edey. I think there's some
Yep.
centers out there. Mara, Krivas from Arizona, Badunga if he comes out from Kansas, who like is a guy who catches lobs and blocks shots and super athletic guy. I think there could be some bigs out there they would look at maybe.
I always mispronounce his last name. Howe or Hogg. I don't know how you pronounce it. Florida.
Yeah,
I'll get a look at him. I'm going to the SEC tournament Thursday and Friday. I'll be doing, if you are an SEC fan, I'll probably have some game coverage from the
uh,
SEC tournament at the
I got
Daily Memphian.
we got some breaking news that just popped up on my phone. It will not be breaking news when people listen because which is not live radio; it's a podcast. But this,
Oh no.
I don't think we ever talked about this on the pod, and it really bums me out. Vince Williams is being waived by the Utah Jazz. He had, he suffered that torn ACL on that play by Tari Eason with the Rockets, and that's just. I mean, I just hate this for this guy. He's had injury
Yeah.
problems already, and this is a guy who's not established in the league. I think it may have been a team option for next season on that contract, and to have this kind of injury and now he's been waived by the Jazz, I really hate it.
Yeah, that's no good for sure. Okay. Well, that'll do it for us this week. As I mentioned, I will be at the SEC tournament later on, so I will have some SEC coverage if you're an SEC fan, but I will also be getting a firsthand look at a lot of these draft guys. So I may have some content there as well. If you've already moved on, if you've moved on to Grizzlies draft season, it's a good time to be watching college basketball because it is March.
Yep.
Make sure you are checking that out over at the Daily Memphian. There's more to life than basketball. What'd you do this week, Chris?
What did I do? I didn't do a whole lot. I did some cleaning up around the house. My friend Addison came over and we half watched some basketball and hung out. I took my son on another driving lesson. I think I talked about that last week, but we're in week 2 of the learning how to drive. We got out of the parking lot and onto some actual city streets. So we made some progress on that front.
I don't have much. I don't have much to add either. I'm in the trenches of what is called the 4-month sleep regression for your kid, which I did not know was a thing. So my kid doesn't sleep. So I'm up all night. So I sleep during the day. That's what I've been doing. Okay, that's it. We will be back next week. But for Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.